You guys all have plans for the 4th? No? I'll tell you what, America's Birthday Parade, 4th of July, downtown St. Louis. 15 marching bands from as far away as Minnesota. 8 beauty queens, Miss Missouri, Miss Illinois, Miss Oklahoma, Miss Tennessee. 16 performance floats, including Kennedy Holmes from The Voice and Audrey Bartholomew from The Voice.
Really?
Yep.
In the Stanley Cup, maybe?
I don't know. We're working on it. Okay, but not so far. So those guys are, yeah. There's more than one version. I did not know. I would like to call to order this meeting of the Public Safety Committee for June 26, 2019. Could we have roll call, please? Thank you.
Chairman Plufka,
Yes, here.
Alderman Kramer,
Present.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Here.
and Alderwoman Sims is absent.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Item 2, everybody have a chance to review the agenda. Are there any amendments or changes to that agenda that want to be proposed? Hearing none, the agenda will stand as submitted. Number 3, we have no announcements. Number 4, we do not have a city administrator's report. Number 5, we have reports of the committee chair and alderman. I'll go first. I do have just a comment to make. Last month, I was late to the meeting, and during the public comment of that meeting, I interrupted a resident a couple of times, actually, during public comment. I've reflected on that over the last month. I want to apologize to the committee and to the staff and to that individual, and I'll try to reach out to her. I had no business interrupting her. Public comment is public comment. She has the right, as anybody has the right, to want to stand and make a comment with regard to what we do and business we conduct. I'm just letting you know it won't happen again, and I apologize. Alderman Kramer?
No report?
Alderman Lockmiller?
No report.
Department reports. Please, Chief Spees.
Yes, sir, thank you. With regarding to the crime reports that have been forwarded to the alderman and the city administrator,
It is on. We continue to focus on the issue of car, I can't call them break-ins because that's really not what they're doing at this point for the most part. These are the guys that are showing up in Brentwood and they're going through cars that are unlocked. We continue to deal with this issue. Brentwood has seen what I would think is considerably less events than our neighbors have in the last month or so. I don't know that it's related to the signs that we've placed throughout Brentwood regarding locking vehicles, but I can tell you that Clayton, Ladue, Maplewood, Richmond Heights have all been more afflicted than we have. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened in Brentwood, because it has. A couple of the areas that we're focusing on right now, Brentwood Forest is always one of our frequent flyers on this. There have been a couple incidents in Brentwood Forest recently, so we have detail going there for the last about 10 days or so. Since that detail has started, we have not really had many incidents. We had one in the 8600 block of Henrietta in this reporting period that resulted in a car being stolen. That vehicle was later recovered in Chesterfield, where they dumped our stolen car and jumped out of our stolen car in Chesterfield and stole 2 additional vehicles in Chesterfield, and they broke into a series of cars there. So year to date, we have 15 stolen autos, 13 of which were what I would call traditional stolen autos. 2 of them were more domestic related, but out of those 13 cars, 11 of them have been recovered. And 10 of the 11 outside that Chesterfield steal were recovered in North St. Louis or North St. Louis County. So it's pretty very consistent in terms of the problems that we're going through on these cars. During this reporting period, we had 2 additional critical incident team responses out of, excuse me, out of people with mental illness. Both of them were handled successfully by officers from Brentwood. We are, Jim, help me out here. I think we have 1 officer that's not CIT trained at this point, and he's scheduled to go. So soon, all of our Brentwood officers will have the CIT training, which is critical for handling the people that we come across on a regular basis with mental illness. During this reporting period, we had a hair shop that was burglarized. It was a braiding store. This is along with cell phone stores, this has been a common event throughout the St. Louis area and Illinois. They're targeting these stores along with the cell phone stores. They're smash and grabs. They'll break a window, run inside, grab phones, and in this case, weaves and some other things, and then run. So we did have one of those in Brentwood. We were one of, I believe, 5 different jurisdictions within the last couple of weeks that have had them. And that is all I had for my report tonight, sir.
Any questions for the chief? I have one. We had authorized the purchase and, I guess, construction of a sign cart with some additional features on it. Where are we at with that?
Right now, as I'm sitting here with you, it's being dressed up nicely by Ad Graphics with police logos and Brentwood Police Department stickers. We had a meeting again today, an internal meeting regarding the deployment of that messaging board. There has to be protocol for us behind how we deploy it, where we deploy it, and what we do with that messaging board. But really, at this point, we have two initial deployments in mind. The first is during the day watch and likely be used in our areas around our stores that will be messaging that we're patrolling the parking lots and things like that. The second and the primary use of this will be at night, and it'll be deployed in areas that our crime analysts and the officers are aware that there may be spikes in cars being broken into. So wherever that may be on that particular time, whether it's Brentwood Forest or York Village, wherever it may be, that sign will be, the messaging board will be deployed at night and then matched with a Brentwood police car. And we are hoping for a deterrence factor there. As you noted, the messaging board also comes equipped with license plate recognition technology. That technology will allow the officers in real time to know if there's a vehicle that comes into or past the sign that's a stolen car. And very common, obviously, that the guys that are doing these break-ins in cars are traveling almost exclusively in stolen vehicles. They don't always leave the plates on their cars. Oftentimes, they'll switch the plates out, so we may not get a hit on the plate, but it does give us an additional chance to know that they're in the area.
Thank you.
I would say that the deployment of the trailer is probably about 2 weeks out.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead. That's all right. Oh,
Should be on.
everything.
It's on. Partnerships with other departments. In Brentwood Forest, for example, I noticed another Regions vehicle on our high school drive. Is that intentional?
The
County?
county officer.
County, it was a county car. Okay. It's just brand new if he does. I didn't know if we had a arrangement.
We do not. We
Okay.
sit in the county. But we have an ongoing arrangement with our surrounding departments with regard to response to radio assignments, things like that. But nothing that we're partnering with them on a regular basis.
It's a wonderful placement of the vehicle. And the other question is, has come up recently, has the law or the legislature changed on front license plates? Are they optional? There's an awful lot of people that don't have front license plates.
No, they're not. You're still required to have a front plate.
What's the ticket for something like that? What would that be called?
Operating a vehicle without a front license plate.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question? Thank you, Chief. Yes, sir. Chief Curtin.
You gotta hit the bottom button, Terry. Just press it once. I turned it off.
Check. Okay, thank you. The weekly report was published, and you all should have had a chance to see that. Nothing out of the ordinary on our run data. EMS runs picked up a little bit from where they've been the last couple of weeks, but overall the report's pretty static. I want to point your attention to towards the end of the report. There's a brief update on Our turnout gear, cleaning and decontamination and inspection, we normally do that in June throughout the year, at least once. That has to be inspected, so that's a required project we're working on. And we went through all of our semi-annual vehicle maintenance recently. That's a major maintenance where everything is checked. The vehicles all receive DOT inspections. All the fluids are changed, brakes are checked. All the repairs are typically done either in the spring or in the fall. And then down below that, you'll see the completed engine room floor project. A couple of pictures I posted there for your viewing pleasure. Invite anybody to stop by and take a look at it. It came out great. We're very happy with it. And so it is a much improved engine room floor. So, and then lastly, we received a nice thank you from a Facebook contributor that Janet picked up on and sent out to us. So I published that for your reading as well. I'm going to switch gears here for just a second. Are there any questions on the normal weekly report? Okay. So a couple of updates. I told you about the engine room floor. We're also, pardon me, we issued an RFP for EMS billing services back in April. We're still working through that. I hope to be bringing that process to this committee in August with a recommendation. And also this year we have work scheduled for interior ADA compliance work to be done in the fire station. Nothing with the elevator, nothing outside, just all things that Terry Johnson identified in her report. So we're working with Horner and Schifrin to get them on board to start that design work with construction plan towards the late fall so that we can run it over 2 budget seasons like we did the mold project. We'll be running it from 19 into 20 with hopefully wrap up by the end of the first quarter in 20. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions for the chief? Thank you, chief.
You're welcome.
The next item we have is the minutes from May 22nd, 2019. Everybody have a chance to review those? Anybody have any changes to make to those minutes? They will stand as submitted. Number 8, our old business, item A, is a request to review other locations where we might have crosswalk beacons or enhanced crosswalks. Bola, would you introduce us to this topic?
So the committee asked us to, oh, sorry.
Yeah. Put a tripod in the middle and spin it around.
The committee asked us to look at other locations in the city where there might be a need for additional crosswalks. And actually, I think we got a list of those places. And so what is our evaluation?
So,
You
Okay,
can address.
sorry, yeah, please.
we'll pass the mic.
Yeah.
We looked at several different places. Some people had flagged areas that we never considered, and we did look at these. The one that I thought made the most sense, or at least in my opinion, was the one closest between the YMCA and Memorial Park. If you recall, right now, I included a picture in We'll switch. No. Okay. Anyhow, we looked at different areas, and like I said, the one that made the most sense would have been the one over between YMCA and Memorial Park. Just to add a little bit more, I guess, try to alert the drivers, because as soon as you stop at the stop sign at Urban, you can continue and go towards Hanley. There is no stop sign. Same thing if you're coming from the Hanley direction towards Brentwood Boulevard, there's no stop sign either. So as you approach that crosswalk, it seems like it would be an argument that would be in favor of putting something like that there. If you recall the one over in McKnight, that's why I included the drawings, that's a blinker sign. So there's the LEDs that are embedded around the perimeter of that sign. You press a button, and then it starts flashing for, I believe it's 30 seconds, so you can safely cross. And it sends a radio signal back and forth between the 2 units, so it flashes in both directions. So I did get a quote, what that would cost if you were to figure out something like that. And I got a quote for the same exact style, except it would be a rapid flash beacon. You know, the rectangular rapid flash beacon was something that we discussed instead of a blinker sign. Well, what else is there that's MUTCD compliant? And it is. So that particular sign, you can see what the cost is there. And then trying to be sensitive to cost, I thought, well, what if form and function, you really just want the function and not necessarily the form? So if you downgraded the sign materials down to a 2-inch square post, you could save roughly $900 on the 2 instead of the higher value that's quoted there. You know, would you want to do that? I don't know. The one we did on McKnight's the decorative aluminum, like 4.5-inch diameter. And again, the 2-inch is compliant with MUTCD. It's got the, I believe it's called the Bulldog button. You press it, it sends the radio signal back and forth. You would have rapid flash beacons on either side of the post, and you'd have a crosswalk sign, 30-inch square on either side.
Okay, and as it says in the report, the money that was budgeted for 2019 has largely been spent to complete the crossing at McKnight. So what would be the chances of including in a 2020 budget enough to do this crosswalk? I mean, I'll just give you my opinion. I think this is as busy and as problematic as McKnight Road is, for the reasons you already identified. And also the fact that I think the YMCA uses it a number of times during the day to bring groups of kids across over to Memorial Park.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, in my opinion, it would be a great place to do the second one, and to do it with using alternative technology, so we could do some sort of a imperfect sort of comparison to say which is, which seems to be more visible, you know, or higher visibility. Would it be possible to incorporate that into 2020?
So there are other locations. At that meeting, I think, we also heard that high school, and is it Harrison? I thought we got another, there was another one by the grade school, and then
Close
just,
to McGrath, I guess?
then this week, we got another request from, is it the Lutheran Services, for one on Strossner and where?
It would actually be south of Hanley Industrial and Strassner, that intersection.
So there's a total of, is that 3?
Yeah.
So we can definitely look in the budget. So what would happen is we budget about 100,000 for site. How much do we budget for signs?
For signs was 15,000, and then the one for McKnight, we actually pulled out of the traffic calming line item. That line was budgeted at 10,000. We spent like 8,100.
So we budget 15,000 for signs, and that would cover one. So if there's a desire to do 3, then we would look to increase that line item, 8,000 times 3, and try to fit that in the budget. So given that kind of feedback,
Yeah.
we'll
I mean, anybody else can weigh in here. I just, my attitude would be, and if there needs to be a hierarchy because of, you know, being financially prudent here, in my opinion, I think that this Strossner location is probably number 1, and then the other 2 would, not to say that they're not important, but just that this one, if we are limited to doing 1 next year, this would be the one I'd like to see us do.
And I've actually asked Dan. I asked Dan to communicate with the person we heard from, whether they might be willing to underwrite the cost. They claim they have about 1,300 employees that use that area. So if they want to underwrite that cost, we'd be happy to do it this year.
And this is the location in Hanley
In
Industrial?
Hanley Industrial. So I definitely agree with what you just said about order of priority. So we will take a look at that during the budget and see whether we can afford more than 1, and then we'll bring that back so you all know going forward. Because our budget process really does not start till August.
Sure, no, I understand that. Anybody else have any questions or comments, Aldrin? Yeah, absolutely.
Testing.
Talk really loud.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity. I Also appreciate the fact that we're moving forward on this topic. I think, however, we can do a better job even than what's being proposed. In the picture of the memo that Dan passed out, the second picture that shows the Strassner area that you're talking about, the first thing that I've noticed on a regular basis here that is kind of solved on McKnight is the proximity of the signage to the crosswalk. And if you look at the actual signage, some number of feet ahead of that crosswalk on Strassner, where it says state law stop when pedestrians are in the crosswalk, the other municipalities, and in fact, the example I keep referring to at Mercy Hospital there on Bellevue, the signage is at the crosswalk. So people see the pedestrians, they see the sign, they see that it says stop, they see that it says state law. It's like having a stop sign 50 feet away from the area where they're supposed to stop. And I don't know what MUTCD says about that, but the other locations where I've seen this same signage deployed, it's closer. And then if
I
you,
would think that because the kit itself includes a button, it would have to be in closer proximity to the.
Scroll up, you see
Scroll up.
that one where we put it, it's right at the crosswalk.
And it would have to be similar on Strassner.
but what it doesn't say on McKnight is it doesn't say stop state law when pedestrians are in the crosswalk on
I don't
McKnight.
think that's the law, actually.
In Missouri, it's yield, it's not stop.
The sign says stop.
I know.
That one does.
You can get a sign to say almost anything.
I looked up the statute, I'm like, well,
I'm just saying, as long as we have that, can we put the sign that, I mean, didn't we used to have a sign that said that there?
no, not at
Or was ahead of that? On both sides? Bowler, didn't we have a sign ahead of that?
I'd look at Google Earth, but
Yeah. Right now, we've got what you want on Strassner on McKnight, but we don't have the signage that goes along with it that says stop state law. Every other place I've seen something like this, we have that signage with a little stop sign and a little pedestrian crossing. So that's my comment, is I think we can do a better job on McKnight. And then when it comes to Strassner, you've got the crossing for the YMCA across to the park. If we do end up getting funding to be able to install the crosswalk lighting there, I hope the signage is there with it. And then further down, you've got the crossing. As you notice, you go into the park and you go a little bit further east, and then there's that crosswalk back to get you towards the Metrolink and towards the promenade. That crosswalk is not really marked at all, to my knowledge. So if we had that same signage, once again, at the crosswalk, not 50 feet in front of it, that would be helpful. And maybe the other one in the Hanley Industrial Court that you're talking about, again, Dan, I don't know what the MUTCD standard is for how far away or how near that signage needs to be or can be placed, but every other place I've seen it, and it's effective for me as a driver, is to have it actually at the crosswalk.
Thank you. Yeah.
as we mentioned, if you put that kit in at Strassner, you will have a 30-inch square diamond plus the downward arrow. I can check to see if it affects it any by adding that sign, either stop or yield for pedestrians and crosswalk. As long as it's MUTCD compliant, I would think we could add that to that same signpost on opposite sides so that it would draw more attention. I don't foresee it being a problem, but we'll definitely check it out before we make such a purchase. The other option I would think you could do is if we had the push button, in advance of that, you could put up a warning sign that would say crosswalk ahead, or it's got the pictogram of a crosswalk. So that if you're totally zoned out, you see the picture, you should know a crosswalk's coming up. Then if someone were in the crosswalk pressing a button, that would be a second series of signs. So whichever's compliant and whichever would gather the most attention, I would say you go with that approach. And we can price up the whole package.
And I think as far as the warning signs and that sign, I think that lime green stands out, especially at night, a lot better.
Right.
Than
Yeah, the ones that we bought are the highest visibility that we can purchase are the ones that we put in over on McKnight.
And the more yellow ones that are on Strassner.
Yeah, like the one on Strassner you see in the picture, that is like a tier down, so to speak. I would go with the high-vis fluorescent and not this amber-colored one. That's my opinion. And typically you do put in the high visibility ones, especially for schools and things of that nature. And a camp to me is a school. It's a daycare or summer camp, whatever you want to call it.
Okay, thank you very much. Item B on old business it has to do with, we made a request last month for CPSM to try to quote to us what it would cost to recreate that portion of their 2017 report that had to do with an analysis of downtime, or I think they referred to it as administrative time with regard to our police department at that time. It was being asked for in the context of a request for additional staff that we want to act on and make recommendations to the full board. They've now come back and given us a bid of sorts, I guess, right? Bola, $22,000, a quote, $22,000 to perform that analysis and to provide us an updated report. And as I understand it, I know we also asked that Ways and Means take this up to see what budgetary constraints they were gonna have with regard to any additional personnel in 2019. But they haven't had a chance, they haven't met since we did that, have they?
Meeting is July 9th.
July 9th, okay. So let's, in the context of all this, what does the committee want to do at this point? I mean, in my opinion, I don't remember what the full CPSM report cost.
46,100.
$46,000?
100.
So to recreate essentially 5 pages of the 52-page report, they are charging us half. I mean, right? Is that what they've done?
If that's the calculation, then that's right.
Okay, all right. I think it's excessive. I mean, I don't, but we talked about this and wanting to have this done. What do you guys think? We should have somewhat of a conversation about this to decide whether to go, what to do.
Mr. Chairman, my thoughts are, if you extract out the money for the moment, I think that it's prudent for us to follow on the path that we've already created for ourselves, which is to, just as we did with the comprehensive plan, to revise, update, and add the newest information possible to the study that was created and that we drafted before. And there was, for example, a significant expense to the update for the comprehensive plan for the city. We first looked at, though, what were the needs of the city. And it's a topic, the public safety topic has pressed so many buttons across the residential side for sure, that it seems as though if we had an opportunity to update the previous findings that we so heavily relied upon and so at the very least used for the benefit of our residents, this opportunity to update it again, although we didn't have a time schedule necessarily to do this, seems prudent in this particular juncture because we are receiving a request to increase manpower. When that happened before, we, as a board, approved the CPSM study, significantly expensive, to decide if we needed to have that increase in manpower. As it turned out, we had the amount of manpower that we needed, but they weren't being efficiently deployed. We now feel they're being efficiently deployed, but if we're going to increase manpower beyond that for the various reasons laid out, I think we would be deficient in not having this next step to the study. Now, $22,000, I understand, and I think that includes a discount, a little bit of a discount.
10%, I think.
You did say that the discount would be minus the 2,000, so it would be 20.
Yeah.
Because I'm a member of ICMA.
That helps. And we can pay it in two convenient installments, one at the beginning and one a little bit later on. Mr. Chairman, I guess my bottom line is, aside from the request for manpower, I think it's prudent for us to follow up with this. It's been how long since our first study, 2015?
It was 16.
16?
It was late 16. Yeah.
Now we are
But we've gone through a
19
number of
plus.
changes.
And we could confirm what we're being told today, that we're vastly deficient and we need to have an increase in manpower, or a little bit deficient. But I wouldn't, just my own personal vote, I would not be prepared to vote in favor of added manpower just on the basis of the request alone when we have this pathway we've already created, and I hope we get a chance to continue with it.
Okay, Steve?
I'd have to agree with Alderman Kramer. The cost floors me, but, you know, another set of eyes, an independent opinion. We do this with their compensation study every 2 years, and as Alderman Kramer mentioned, with the comp. So I'd be leaning towards having this study done.
Let me ask you a question in the context of what, especially what you said, Alderman. And that is there a middle course here that we can navigate that it wouldn't have the benefit of being done by a completely outside agency, but it might be able to be accomplished by using some hard data and reporting it internally to us at a significant savings of cost. Would that be enough, or do you think that, or is it or would your concern be that we'd like to have somebody from the outside looking in, one way or the other? Yeah?
That would be my choice, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so the fact that it hasn't been brought up to Ways and Means yet, and we haven't heard what Ways and Means has to say about this year and even 2019 perhaps, looking forward, I know we're not started till August. What I'd like to do with this is to, and the fact that Sunny's not here too, I'd like us to bring this up at the July public safety meeting for disposition and decide whether to. So now, Bola, let me ask you this: this is not something we've obviously budgeted in any way. Would this be something that would have to be the subject of some kind of a budget revision?
How do we pay for it?
Right.
Are there savings? I'm not aware that there is any.
Okay.
Because this is discussions that have been ongoing in Public Works Committee, where Dan has a number of projects that the cost has exceeded what we have budgeted.
Okay.
And I think Karen reminded the committee, Public Works, that in her time here, which is 2 years, 3 years, we tend not to dip into fund balance. And given, unless the board absolutely think it's priority, given the fact that the city will be issuing additional debt, I presume, for the Brentwood Bound project, I think it's important to preserve the fund balance because that is a key component that the rating agencies will be looking at how often and for what reasons is the city dipping into its fund balance. And this was a lengthy conversation that Karen and I had when we were about to issue the 2018 series COPS. So the board needs to be mindful of how we dip into fund balance.
So my only reaction to that would be if the Ways and Means Committee is, has a favorable response to us looking to do this and the numbers we're talking about, I certainly wouldn't want to hold up the process by virtue of a $20,000 payment for an entire year.
And you know, another thing that could be done, and we've done that before, particularly regarding the firehouse, and was it the asbestos? Or what was it? Mold, yes, it was the mold.
Take your pick, we've had it all. I was gonna say, yeah,
Thank you. No, that's
yeah.
there were projects that the fire department had in the budget as the public works department that we had to put on hold so that we
understand.
could fund that. So that would be a recommendation. If there are expenditures throughout the city in the police department budget that hasn't been incurred and there's a need to do this, that's where I would be looking at to fund it.
Okay, very good.
Or perhaps, Mr. Chairman, the police department might increase their police forfeiture seizure fund in the coming months. Oh, we did? How did that happen? Stopped it? But if they seize something, where does it go?
DEA officer's not assigned there anymore. We had an officer assigned to DEA, and that's where the funding was coming from. Taken out of DEA and back into uniform.
So if we stop a vehicle in our city that has a significant amount of something, it goes someplace else.
Almost all of the funding comes from investigative work.
Okay.
Not involved in that anymore.
Thank you.
Go ahead, yeah.
Since Sunny chairs Ways and Means, couldn't we go ahead and move this along by getting it to their July meeting instead of waiting to come back to ours?
Absolutely. Oh, I was hoping that they would come up with, they would take up the original budgetary, right. That's great. And then we can act on it to whatever extent we need to at the end of July. Okay, very good. The next item is the light RFP update, how we, what if we put out bids and nobody came? Is that what the title of that is? So what?
Yes.
So where are we at?
As you mentioned, we did not receive any bids whenever we had the bid opening on the 6th. No one showed up. We discussed it at Public Works, and rather than try to do something different than the regular procedures we do for purchases, we're going back out. I solicited at least a half a dozen electricians, contacted them directly, sent it to them directly. So I'm hopeful I'll get at least one or two. These were big companies, and I'd sent it to two we'd used in the past, and they said they were interested, but they never submitted. So again, hopefully by drumming up a little more business, we'll actually receive these for the 20 lights that were in the RFP. But knowing what I already know, as far as the difficulty with getting the lights in would be the actual conduit and wiring. So I wanted to look outside the box, and I looked at some solar packages. So solar packages, I included some information there. I started out with this green shine model because they're the closest to mimic what an actual AC powered street light would produce as far as lumens and performance and all that sort of thing. The only downside I see with it is you have to get used to looking at a solar panel that's attached to it. In order to produce a battery life that can produce the number of lumens and have it for a 5 to 7 day period with no sun, that's the size panel you would need. But knowing that I actually contacted the trustees of York Village to see if they would be interested, because I'm like, well, I know there we'd be tearing up streets, doing conduits, and same thing. I have to issue a separate RFP for that, but what if I don't receive anything? So I notified them. They didn't like the ones with the panels that were to the side. They would like more traditional, like a colonial style. So I know I included some information on those. It's like they look like this, so you could either get a single, a duplex, a triplex, but the panels are on top. The drawback with these is because the panels are smaller, the batteries are smaller, they have less of a reserve. So if it isn't in full light, if it's a cloudy day, it may only have 2 to 3 days worth of power instead of 5 to 7. The other thing is that the number of lumens it produces is roughly 300 per lamp head, so 600 for a duplex system, versus the standalone was way over 2,000. So it'll produce less light, less of a radius around it, but it will produce more light than what's there, which is either nothing or very little, or it's a porch light that's several yards away from the street. So the good thing I see with the solar is if you went with the bigger one, if you go with Ameren, it's $22 a month for that post top fiberglass light. So 22 times 12, it's a little over $250 a year for one light. We're putting 20 plus of them up, and you have to sign a 20-year agreement with Ameren. So you do the math, and if there's no increases in their rate, which that's impossible, but say that there weren't, it's over $100,000 for those 20 lights just in electrical consumption. Once you put the solar up, the battery life on the bigger ones was like 25 years. The smaller ones is anywhere from 3 to 5. So you're not subject to them increasing rates and having, higher power bills over time. So what I'm thinking is I'd like to try at least one. If I can find one that meets their criteria, great. If not, maybe we find one that fits on our right of way that we can live with and try it as a pilot. If it does well, then maybe that's the wave of the future. You can get decorative ones. That's why I tried to include those in the files there.
I was looking at the one that you had here that's the LED solar area light. It's the sort of the flat panel with the.
Yeah, it's like a modern look.
Right, it's a modern look, that's true. And
I liked it, but I don't know that they liked it.
I can't tell what it says says the luminous efficacy, sorry, I thought that said efficiency, 150 to 1600. So does that mean that it varies between those two numbers?
Well, it depends on, yeah, whichever LED array that you get. Yeah, it could be as high as that high-end number that you mentioned or as low.
The 1600 is relatively close to the 2000 hardwired.
Right.
The 150 obviously is pretty low.
Yeah, because they didn't want to buy something that hardly produces anything, because then it's kind of a waste. You know,
Right.
you can get those through like Home Depot even for your own house. They're a few $100s. It would be a solar standalone. Like if you had a really big yard and you didn't want to run the wiring because it's super expensive or you don't want to tear up your lawn, you could just build a base and put the solar up. And that's kind of why I looked at these, is if we just built the base, Public Works could do that and then rent equipment to lift it like we did with the McKnight crosswalk sign and do everything in-house, and I don't care about Ameren
You
anymore.
didn't get a specific response out of York with regard to this one?
The one with just the flying saucer top,
Yeah.
they didn't really have a warm feeling on that when they prefer a traditional colonial post top. I thought that's kind of a blend.
Sure.
You know, it's black, I don't know, to me it was kind of benign. It didn't have a
Right.
big panel on it. It's mostly on top. I'll keep looking until I find one that maybe mirrors more of a coach lantern type.
Is there any timing as to when you think you might hear something from the electricians that you more directly?
The bid opening's on the 8th of July, so I'll reach out to them the end of the week and see if they have any questions. There's no pre-bid or anything. We just ask for them to submit sealed bids to City Hall.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Steve?
The electricians that you called, are they a smaller company than what we were going to?
I actually have a mix. I've got small, large, and one's all the way out in St. Charles, actually St. Peter's. So I thought, well, maybe the St. Louis County ones are too busy, so I'll throw a wider net and see if I can find
I think at
someone.
Public Works, we discussed trying to, break it up a little bit, so maybe a smaller shop would be willing to pick it up, because it didn't seem to be attractive enough to some of the larger electricians.
Yeah, we kept it as the 20 because we feel we get a better price, because the mobilization, demobilization, insurance costs would be spread out over that one RFP. But there will be follow-on RFPs for either York or the other lights, because there were 3 of them, the ones on Agnes, Evans, and Rose. Ameren can't accommodate those because of switches, and that's where overhead converts over to underground. They don't want to put anything at the end of those streets at Brentwood Boulevard.
And if you go up to Richmond Heights, where ECDC is located, they've got solar lighting in their parking lot, and it's supplemented with wind turbines too. And I went up there at night, and it's pretty bright. I was really surprised.
Yeah, that's what I noticed. I mean, more progressive areas like Florida, California, they use them all the time, and they have wind, they have solar. The other option, which I thought was pretty cool, is you can actually do CCTV cameras. So if you're worried about security, you can put up one of those with the big panels, and it's got a light, and it's got the camera. You can angle the camera whichever way you want, and the camera actually sends data back to a smartphone. So if somebody broke in or whatever, you can review the video on your phone.
I think it'd be great for a commercial application or our parks, or especially down Manchester Road.
Well,
when-
yeah,
when you
I'd
got
mentioned it to
flooding.
parks like at Oak Tree. If there's vandalism, maybe you would do a pilot with the one with the camera, or you would get it, not put the camera on it until you needed it, because you can get basically the post would be such that it would accommodate the camera later.
I asked Dan to find out.
Yeah, the Green Shine company said that if you went with one of theirs, they would let you do a 60-day trial, and all you would owe at the end is shipping back if you didn't want to keep it. If you do want to keep it, you owe the whole amount, and that's the roughly $4,700. So round numbers say it's $5,000. If you like it, after 60 days, you pay the $5,000. If you don't, pay the shipping back to California.
As far as the Colonial, do they have one installed anywhere in St. Louis?
I asked that they do not. Missouri's not. I don't know. We haven't embraced solar like other communities, I guess, because our kilowatt hours are cheaper, versus I know like East Coast, West Coast, their utility companies charge way more than Ameren does, or at least that's what I've been told. But yeah, if you wanted to try one out specifically in an area, we can vet it out.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Dan, we have a number of residents who've been waiting for the beginning of the deployment of this project. So we now are going to wait until the end of the opening of the bids before the first phase is going to happen. The first, I guess, Brentwood Forest is not the first part, Ward 4.
No, Brentwood Forest, there's, all the wards have some lights within that 20 of the RFP. So assuming we get at least one on July 8th, those 20 will be done. 3 of them that dropped off the list, which would be near you guys, would be Agnes, Rose, and Evans. But Ameren can't accommodate those. So maybe you would do a solar there, but you couldn't put it on Brentwood Boulevard right away unless you had county permission. But I thought, well, if Ameren can't do it there, maybe you would go with the solar there if it's warranted. There's a little more light there because you've got stray lighting from all the shops and businesses, and there's way more motorists, so their headlights kind of illuminate those streets versus if you're looking at a street that's kind of off the beaten path, like say a Laverne Court or Douglas Court, you know, those don't have near the amount of density with lights. I'd have to look at the schedule, but I know that, of course, we would have to take it to the board, assuming that it fits the budget, and then from there, enter into a contract, get the contract, notice proceed to the contractor. So I would hope that it would start August, September. And that's hoping that there's no unforeseen conditions because, of course, they have to call in locates. They can't just start digging and dropping, you know, conduit in the ground. So, I mean, there's water, there's gas. That's why I think, you know, your critical path is always the trenching. If you can get the trenching done in the base, Ameren just has to pop the light on there. And they've already bought the lights. They have the wiring. So that's why I was looking at solar. It's like, well, then I'm not so dependent on them. I'm not hampered by other utilities. If there's a utility in my way with a solar base, I just move the base. And then you're pretty much done.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, thank you, thanks. New business, we have a police department vehicle purchase request for the fiscal year 2020 budget. Chief?
Can you throw the mic?
Jim McIntyre is going to explain the request that was made to the city administrator. And this is, just as reference, this is for the 2020 budget.
So you probably have in front of you a graph, a couple graphs that we put together regarding the fleet. Specifically, we have one that's broken down with the Tauruses that we own, and the other is broken down with all the vehicles that we own. So the first chart indicates the Ford Tauruses. 2 of them are 2014s, 2 are 2015s. This mileage was collected the first part of the month. The date of this memo is June 6th, so that mileage has gone up just a bit. Essentially, the PIU, what we call the Police Interceptor Utility, that's the Ford Explorer. That owns Ford owns 63% of the market share, and that is 80% of their vehicles that they sell for that they have sold are the PIUs. They exclusively sell that now. They don't make the Ford Taurus anymore. So if you're going to buy a police car from Ford, you're either going to buy an F-150 or you're going to buy the PIU. We have found it to be extremely reliable. It's safe. It's a higher seated platform. What that means in real life is that when we're driving on a commercial parking lot, like say the Promenade, the officers can see over the top of most of the cars. It makes it a whole lot easier when they're looking for a police car or we're looking for them. They're safer. The occupant safety rating is much higher. They have a 75 mile per hour rear end crash safety certification. The PIU is the only police vehicle that has that. So what we're looking at is the 2020s. The 2020s will have 2 that are coming in August. We were hoping a little sooner, but we got the born on dates for them now, August 3rd and August 4th for the hybrids. Ford tells us that will experience significant fuel savings with the hybrid. That hasn't been tested in the field, obviously, yet. But if I can call your attention to the 2014, specifically Car 30 and Car 35, those mileages now are 35 is approaching 80,000 miles, and car 30 is approaching 75,000 miles. Um, in terms of police life, that's about 140,000 miles on your basic car. This is 1.9 square miles where these vehicles are being driven. We're reaching the end of the shelf life or the usable service life of them. Um, Car 31, that's our newest car in the fleet. That's a PIU, a utility vehicle. Obviously, the officers, it's a larger car. Um, we have 2 officers right now in field training, and sitting in the Tauruses with the laptop computers. These are two of our females. They're kind of tiny. They're still squeezed in there. It's not an easy thing to get out of. The PIU is significant. The passenger compartment is significantly larger. What we're looking for, what we'd like to do, is take the 3 of the 4 Tauruses and trade those in on 3 PIUs for next year. So these would be 2020s or maybe even the 2021, depending upon what.
Are you asking for 5 vehicles
No.
altogether? No.
No, we have 2 that have been approved this year. These are already been ordered. They'll come in for the fiscal year 2019.
This is 3 additional.
Correct. This would be 3 additional for 2020, fiscal year 2020.
Okay.
And we're asking for the Ford PIU on these. They're the Ford hybrids, which should allow us a little bit better fuel savings. The key to all of this is 3 of the vehicles will be over 100,000 miles as we sit here a year from now, and all of the vehicles will be over 85,000 miles. Our entire marked fleet will be over 85,000, which we have 1 at the dealer right now with a transmission. We're seeing the repair costs, and Dan perhaps could speak to it a little bit, but we're seeing the repairs starting to climb. The interior compartments of the cars are starting to break down. I have some pictures that were attached if you. I don't know if you had a chance to look at them, a couple of the cars, but that's what we're looking for. We feel that at this point, it's imperative that we act quickly and what we'd like to do is trade these in so we still have some value to the cars before they're exactly, yeah, and some of those are the steering wheel that Mr. Kramer is referring to. This duty belt, and I don't even have all the equipment that all the officers wear on them, is difficult to get out. When they get out, they hit, and when you have to get out quickly, it hits the steering wheel. So like I said, Ford doesn't even make that vehicle anymore. But that's what we're looking at.
And so the goal here would be that with these 3, you'd have 5 new cars within a calendar year.
Yeah, give or take. Yeah, so these will come in August.
Or vehicles, I should say, not cars.
Correct. And if we order the new ones, we order them in January. They typically don't arrive till June or July. So essentially within 365 days, correct.
Okay. So what action, go ahead, Steve.
I'm confused because we got $50,000 budgeted for vehicles this year. That was for 2. But now were they different type of vehicles than the ones you're talking about now?
No, the same, the PIU, the Police Interceptor Utility.
Okay.
Right.
So when do we get those?
Those, we are told, I just talked to Ford earlier this week, we're told late August or early September.
Okay.
When we take delivery of them.
So we will have, they'll all be SUVs by sometime next year.
Right, and the thing to keep in mind is those 2 vehicles are not additions to the fleet. Those are to replace 2 vehicles that were total losses.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any type of, like we're doing with the body cams, is there like a consortium of municipalities that maybe go in together, pool together to buy vehicles at the same time and get a better price?
Yes, sir. So on the state contract, the state of Missouri negotiated a contract. So that's what we buy off of. So everybody puts their orders in, and so we get a fleet discount. That's a negotiated price that Ford.
That 33,600 is that discount?
Correct.
With that discount?
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Madam City Administrator, can you speak to the budget topic for 2020 and beyond? What these, are the vehicles in line with what we have? Do we need to add more? What-
So every year, we, since I've been here, we replace a number of police vehicles. And there is a city policy that has to do with how each vehicle is evaluated before they qualify for replacement. So I would presume that any department making a request for replacement of a city vehicle would go through that same process. Obviously, all of this is based on funding and how much money we have. So we go through the budget process starting in August, evaluate each request, and fund accordingly. So I think consistently we've funded police vehicles every year. Sometimes it's greater than two, sometimes it's two. So we would do the same this year.
So are you looking for any kind of action by us in
I'm
this
not.
committee, other than just to understand?
This is information only
Okay,
from my
This is
perspective.
information only to understand it as we, and it'll be a part of your budgeting for 2020? That's correct. Okay. Did you have any, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Okay. Any other questions? Major, thanks very much. I appreciate it. The last item we have here is citizen comments. If there is anybody in the audience who would like to make comment with regard to public safety or on any issues, please step forward and give us your name and address. I'll give you 3 minutes. Seeing nobody come forward, I will close public comment and entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.